Okay, so today I want to talk about Dakota Kai and how, people think she's being buried by Creative and Triple H and, what she recently posted on X saying, she missed wrestling, she missed the fans, but she's not hurt by the way. And sad to say, but I think WWE is, going, out with the old, in with the new. And I don't see Dakota Kai being in WWE another 5 years. Honestly, I don't see her being in WWE in the next 2 to 3 years. And it's simply because, the women's roster is really stacked. It's full of good wrestlers, honestly. And this is probably the hardest competition of women wrestlers and just wrestlers in general that you have to compete against. In the... I don't even want to say attitude era, but through the 80s to even the 2000s, sort of. You still have a lot of other wrestling promotions, but Vince McMahon and WWE, they didn't have all of these side deals. Triple H just got a hold of AAA as well, which, he doesn't own, AAA, but they have like a collaboration. He just did a collaboration with TNA. He also doing some kind of collaboration with NWA. They used to have, like OVW, and I think they used to do something with Ring of Honor, but those were kind of like developmental, almost like a NXT type of deal. So now, it's great that WWE has NXT. That's great. They also have Evolve now, which is also great. But with all these collaborations, and it's also good that AEW is another big company too. Just hey, if you don't make it with WWE, you can still go to AEW, which they have competition there too. But you can get a nice paycheck and not be wrestling for $100. On the indie circuit taking bumps. But what my main point, what I was getting back to was, the competition back then, you had to be the best of the best. But also, I feel like Vince McMahon had great storytelling to the point where, you didn't have to be the best women's wrestler or even the best wrestler to sort of get over. If you had a good gimmick and the fans loved it, he was finding a place for you on TV. Vince had you on TV. The problem with Dakota Kai, isn't that she can't wrestle. I think Dakota Kai, is average, just your average, wrestler. And her gimmick, I'm not even really sure what her gimmick is, but the amount of talent right now that WWE possesses, one Dakota Kai is going to have to come harder. And the storytelling, creative isn't doing much for her. So she's has to do something to get herself over more if she wants to stay. But then you're in a faction, Damage Control, which is almost as over as like Tokyo Cyber Squad from Stardom. And you're in a faction with Kairi Sane, Asuka, and Io. And Io is the women's champion right now. They're in a faction together, but you're telling me she couldn't just come to the ring, accompany Io? You know, like, what? I mean, like, they're literally benching Dakota Kai. She had like 2 matches, I think, this year. Like, at least since Raw on Netflix. But then, you know, you're not utilizing her for anything. And she's in a faction with the current women's champion. So I have no clue why she can't just accompany Io and get some clout, get over with the fans with that, just being there at the ring. I mean, she's faced Bianca and Rhea at WrestleMania. Maybe the women's champion in my faction needs a little, you know, support. Like, what is Triple H doing? You know, another reason that they might not be pushing her hard is because she's injury prone. The whole time Damage Control was really popping, Dakota Kai was injured. And let's not forget, you had Bayley in this faction too. And, you know, you had a powerful faction. Dakota Kai, you're hurt. And, you know, if you know anything about working for a company, whether it's wrestling or, you know, even Amazon, you know, it could be Walmart. You know, if the company starts to see where they think, you know, you're just someone who's constantly hurt, and, you know, they start to put you to the side and they want you to quit before they fire you. You know, if creative has nothing for Dakota Kai, you know, it's gonna be lights out for her. You know, I think they was trying to go lights out with the Street Profits, but, you know, Montez Ford, you know, he started doing the little pumping thing with his hands. You know, he's getting over right now. So the Street Profits just added about 3 to 4 years to their WWE career, unless Triple H totally just booked them into oblivion. You know, it's kind of sad, but Dakota Kai either is gonna have to wait until Damage Control comes back, which honestly I'm starting to think Damage Control is gonna be no more. At least you might have one more year of Damage Control, and that's it. Asuka is definitely probably on her way out, because I think Asuka might be either late 30s or Asuka might be 40 something right now. She's probably going to be on her way out. You know, Bianca and Rhea, you know, in women's wrestling, I mean, if you had a good 5 years, that was a good career. You know, if you, not everyone had that 10. You usually had maybe like 3 women wrestlers that stayed longer than 10 years. You know, Alexa Bliss, you know, she's still going to be here, but you know, even people like Alexa Bliss probably has 5. Becky Lynch probably has 5. Rhea probably has 5 left. You know, our great women wrestlers right now is about to start putting the new generation over. You know, you can't have Rhea Ripley win 9 more women's championships. It's not going to happen. There's too much talent that has to get over. And I mean, just looking at, you know, the roster. I mean, if you look at B-Fab, right? B-Fab and Dakota Kai. I mean, people might hate me for this, but, you know, just right now, B-Fab and Dakota Kai probably has about the same amount of clout, or at least like fan respect. You know, of course Dakota Kai has a little bit more, but she hasn't been doing anything. That's kind of what I'm getting at. You know, Dakota Kai hasn't been doing anything because she's was injured, and then she's not injured, and Triple H does nothing with her. You know that's just the way it is. And I mean, even Bayley was kind of mentioning that, you know, Bayley might spend her last, you know, 5 years in AEW with Mercedes Moné. They're great friends, and, you know, they're kind of going to do the same thing with like Ricochet. You know, I'm going to give you that fame that you want. You know, and it comes with money. But, you know, how long is AEW going? I think AEW is going to stay around just because this is like the social media era. There's exposure, and WWE needs competition. You know, the top dogs we know are going to go to AEW. I mean, the top dogs are going to go to WWE. But trust and believe, WWE is outpricing the middle class, and I wouldn't even say middle class, your average fan base. You're outpricing them. Kids watch WWE, so the parents have to take them. The parents aren't going to spend, you know, $600 on a nosebleed ticket and then have to buy 4 tickets. No one's going into debt just to go to Raw or go to SummerSlam or something, like, or $40,000. Nope. They're gonna say, let's go to AEW. So that's another video for another time. We talking about Dakota Kai, but if WWE keeps that up, you know, AEW gonna explode. Cause I looked at the tickets for AEW and I was like, you know, thinking about taking my family, because, you know, we watch wrestling, and those tickets were nice. Those tickets were actually cheaper than SmackDown. So, and you know, AEW doesn't have like garbage wrestling. You know, you can still enjoy yourself. I don't care too much for the hardcore stuff, but back to Dakota Kai in the women's division. You know, Charlotte Flair probably has, you know, maybe 3 years after this comeback and these boos and everything. And, you know, she basically passed the torch to Tiffany Stratton. So I think Tiffany is one of these superstars that wants to be here long term. She wants to be great. You know, I give Tiffany probably like 10 years, you know, with the company. I mean, and you still have people like Cora Jade, Chelsea Green, you know. You even have Ivy Niles, which is like a female Kurt Angle. And then you know, you have people like Julia, Roxanne Perez, you know. I just don't. Oh, and I forgot Jade Cargill, which Jade Cargill is in her 30s. I give Jade Cargill 5 more years. You know, I give her 5 more years. And, you know, you have all of these NXT, like Lash Legend, Kalani Jordan, they're about to move up, or they're going to move up to the main roster soon. Give it 1 or 2 more years, because you have all of this Evolve stuff, this LFG. You know, we didn't even get into the TNA, AAA roster that's going to just make an appearance. Look at Joe Henry. He just got in there at WrestleMania with Randy Orton. You're telling me you had absolutely nobody on your main roster that could have gotten to a slight feud with Randy Orton, or an open challenge to Randy Orton? You got Joe Henry. I mean, business is business, you know. But Dakota Kai, they're you know, man, there's so many. The roster is stacked, is what I'm trying to say with Dakota Kai. You know, I mean, you can say the same thing for Shotzi. You know, Shotzi, Dakota Kai. You know, I think a lot of these women are about to get released. You know, they're about to get released if they don't get over soon. And with Dakota Kai, it's probably because she's injury prone. I think that's really the big one right there. You know, the fans love Dakota Kai to a certain extent. You know, it's more so that they're buying Damage Control merch. But Damage Control is pretty much, I don't want to say dead, but I mean, they're right there. You know, they're about to have a heart attack and die. Because Asuka, as much as over as Asuka is, and Kairi Sane in America, people respect her kind of like Io. You know, Io is over now. Like, Io is hot. Io is on fire. And Dakota Kai is not injured, and you don't even let some of that fire rub off on her. And the crazy part is they don't have to cheat. They really don't have to cheat. They could really just have Dakota Kai out there, you know, cheering her, or even taking a bump, you know, or something. Like, I mean, it's wild the way Triple H and creative is handling Dakota Kai. And man, I could just see, you know, with the Vince era, bruh, he would have her out there some kind of way. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's about 2 hours to do.
10-4. Okay, we don't do no edits over here. So if y'all heard that, it don't matter. Y'all know how I go down on this channel. But I think, you know, I really was about to end it right there. You know, Dakota Kai might be in AEW. And even then, she'll get a good run in AEW, but what will they make you do in AEW? All those crazy spots, you know, you might get some stiff Japanese wrestlers. I mean, Julia was a stiff, strong style wrestler. WWE, you know, she toned it down, but we can tell just from that, you know, I guarantee you, if Julia gets over a little more, she's pinning Rhea Ripley. It's gonna happen. You know, like I say, Julia is probably the closest thing. You know, WWE wanted Hannah Kimura. She was gonna come here. And the best thing you got to that is Julia. So Julia will be over in WWE. It's just a matter of time. Io Sky is, you know, Io Sky probably has like 5 to 6 more years also. 2030, I don't expect to see Io Sky unless she's coming down the ramp as a Royal Rumble participant. You know, it's the booking, bro. The booking. You have way too many wrestlers, but you also have a bunch of shows, which is great. SmackDown would be great at 3 hours if you can actually write a great story. Raw would be great at 3 hours if you could actually write a great story. Creative gotta come, you know, it's creative and a lot of other stuff that's holding Dakota Kai back. And that's pretty much it, man. You know, injury and creative is what's holding Dakota Kai back. It really has nothing to do with her. I mean, what y'all want her to do? Put on a mask and start acting crazy? I mean, if y'all not gonna do nothing with her, you know, throw her in some other faction. I mean, her best friend is the women's champion, and y'all don't even have her congratulating her, like running to the ring and doing something. You know, I can go on and on about this, but I blame Triple H. I blame creative. Have a nice day.